Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to another edition of Crimes of the Week International. Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to Crime Zone. As hard as it is to believe, we're already more than 3 months into 2025, and if you've been tuning into the channel for a while now, you know that can mean only one thing. It's time for another edition of Dumbest International Criminals, our quarterly recurring series where we take a look at some of the dumbest criminals and world crime stories that we've covered so far in a given year on Crimes of the Week International. One thing to keep in mind is that these segments have not been edited since they appeared in their respective lists, so minor details and things like specific charges may have been updated since we first covered these stories. Also, if you like these videos, be sure to let us know in the comments section below. With that out of the way, let's get into it. Representatives from the Zambia police service say that one of their own officers found himself behind bars last week after he freed more than a dozen inmates from a local police station, something he allegedly did because he wanted them to be able to enjoy the New Year's holiday. The whole thing started at around 10 a.m. on December 31st, when the officer in question, Detective Inspector Titus Piri, was on duty at the Leonard Chilo police station in the capital of Lusaka. Despite the early hour, it appears that Piri was already in quite the festive mood. According to reports, he was hitting the alcohol pretty hard. Not only that, but he was determined to make sure he wasn't the only one having a good time. After forcibly taking the keys from one of his fellow officers, Piri headed into the prisoner holding area. He then allegedly began unlocking the cell doors, telling the inmates that they could leave and that they were, quote, free to cross over into the new year. 13 of the 15 people in custody managed to escape the building before Piri fled himself, presumably to continue his celebrations elsewhere. By the time the situation was reported to higher-up officials, several hours had apparently passed, and all of the escaped inmates were long gone. According to local news sources, the suspects were in custody for a variety of offenses, including assault, robbery, and burglary. At the time of this recording, it seems that the only person authorities have been able to track down is Piri himself. He was quickly arrested over the stunt on charges of aiding suspects to escape from lawful custody. Currently, a manhunt is ongoing to try and find the 13 missing inmates. Representatives from the Hong Kong police force say that a would-be thief is in custody this week, following an equally bizarre and terrifying incident in which he allegedly tried to rob a woman while high on drugs with a bunch of fake money stuffed into his pants. According to local news sources, the whole thing happened shortly before 2 p.m. on January 14th, when the victim, a woman identified only by the last name of Eng, used an ATM in the city's Mongkok shopping district. After withdrawing 20,000 Hong Kong dollars, the equivalent of about 2,600 USD, she began walking down the road towards a nearby plaza. What she didn't know, though, was that a man was following closely behind her. He trailed her for about 100 yards before attacking her and trying to snatch her purse. Luckily for the woman, 2 bystanders who saw what was going on immediately jumped in to help, one of whom was an off-duty police officer. They managed to restrain the robber until more help could arrive. When police got to the scene, they questioned the suspect, identified by the last name of Kwok, who told them that he had taken space oil that day. For those unaware, space oil is the name of a new street drug that has recently exploded in popularity across Hong Kong. It comes in liquid form and is generally vaped by users. There is apparently no standard recipe, so to speak, for the drug, though it often contains mixtures of cannabinoids, ketamine, and etomidate, a medical-grade sedative. Following Kwok's arrest, one more strange discovery was made. While searching his person, officers reportedly found 21 fake $500 Hong Kong banknotes stuffed into his underwear. So far, it's unclear why Kwok had the counterfeit currency or where he got it. When the incident was over, both Kwok and Eng were taken to a local hospital. The female victim was treated for minor injuries, while Kwok was taken in for a mental health evaluation. A 19-year-old Argentina thief was apparently served a heaping spoonful of instant karma this week after he carjacked a rideshare driver, only to quickly crash the vehicle and find himself under arrest after he tried to hide out in a rather unlucky location. According to reports, it all started sometime on the night of January 7th when an Uber driver in the city of Córdoba picked up the male suspect, who was posing as an ordinary passenger. For most of the ride, things went normally. That was, until the victim went to drop off the man at his destination in the city's Marques Anexo neighborhood. Instead of getting out, the 19-year-old allegedly attacked the driver, striking him multiple times in the head before forcing him out and taking off in his red Fiat. Though the 19-year-old managed to flee the scene, unfortunately for him, he didn't make it very far before police caught up. He was pretty easy to find since, he stole an Uber and the app was still tracking all of the car's movements. Even so, apparently he wasn't willing to give up just yet, prompting a chase. That chase continued for some time until the teen suspect attempted to pull off a desperate maneuver. While trying to get away from pursuing officers, he drove perpendicular across several lanes of traffic, not realizing that there was a large drainage ditch on the other side. The car went headfirst into the ditch, immobilizing the vehicle. While the man once again managed to flee, this time on foot, it wasn't long before his bad luck caught up to him when he attempted to hide at a property close to the crash site. It turned out that property belonged to a prison guard who promptly helped police to arrest him. At the time of this recording, the unidentified suspect remains in custody and is awaiting formal charges. Authorities in the Australian state of Victoria say that a would-be arsonist put the bare ass in embarrassed recently after he tried to torch a business under the cover of darkness and instead set himself on fire, an equally humiliating and dangerous crime that was captured by security cameras. The whole thing reportedly took place in the early morning hours of Christmas Day at a burger restaurant in the Melbourne suburb of Doncaster East. Surveillance cameras show a pair of masked perpetrators walking up to the business, dousing the entrance with what appears to be an accelerant before one of them attempts to set the whole thing ablaze. Unfortunately for the would-be firebug, he got a little closer to the action than he intended. While a small fire did start at the front door to the business, most of it ended up spreading to his clothing. The surveillance camera shows the moments immediately after as the man appears to panic as flames quickly engulf his pants. It all happens so fast that all the man can do is strip off his pants and underwear before running butt naked to a nearby escape vehicle with his equally terrified accomplice. It's believed a third person was waiting in the white van and was acting as the getaway driver. While the whole thing played out in a slightly comedic way, police definitely aren't laughing. It's easy to see how things could have gone differently, and if the fire had caught, they say it isn't just the business that would have been at risk. There are apartments above the restaurant as well, and some of its residents are apparently senior citizens who might not have been able to make it to safety in time. All the more concerning, police say that someone tried to torch the same business again this week on January 7th. While the second attempt was also unsuccessful, authorities say this time the culprits actually managed to make their way inside. They say that they are still investigating though and have not officially yet linked the two crimes. As for the bare-ass bandit, investigators say that they are still working to identify him and his accomplices. Anyone with information about either of the attempted arson incidents is asked to reach out to Victoria Police. In other crap-related crime news, authorities in England's Cumbria County say that a 20-year-old wannabe burglar has been sentenced this week following a string of small-time thefts last year that were foiled by a lump of dog poop. According to reports, the low-level crime spree took place on August 26, 2024, when then 19-year-old Brian Harold wreaked havoc across the city of Carlisle with an older accomplice. Over the course of one evening, the pair broke into several vehicles, stealing tools and other items, before moving on to damaging property and taking decorative items from a number of homes. Apparently feeling emboldened by their success, the two decided to finish off by going for a bigger score. They attempted to break into the house of a local family so that they could rob their residence. However, that plan fizzled out pretty quickly when they tried to get in through a window and realized it was locked. While the burglary may have been a bust, Harold still managed to get himself caught. He was connected to the attempted break-in after dog poop he accidentally stepped in at the crime scene was matched to a pair of shoes he owned. ones he was still wearing when police tracked him down. This week, Harold pleaded guilty to multiple offenses related to the summer crime spree, including attempted burglary, 3 counts of theft, and 3 offenses of vehicle interference. Despite this, it appears officials decided to go easy on him after his lawyer noted that he suffered from substance abuse problems and was overly susceptible to peer pressure. In addition to an 18-month community order, Harold must complete 150 hours of unpaid work and 10 days of rehabilitation activity. His older accomplice is expected to be sentenced at a later date. Authorities in Japan's Saitama Prefecture say that a 46-year-old man was arrested this week after he allegedly stole an ambulance he called after becoming fed up with paramedics during the middle of a drunken episode. According to reports, the whole thing started shortly before 7 p.m. on January 20th, when emergency responders were called to a home in the city of Kiku. They arrived to find a 46-year-old man, later identified as Hiroshi Hirata, who was complaining of stomach pain and saying that he needed to go to the hospital. The 3 paramedics who responded to the call checked Hirata out, but determined that there was nothing wrong with him. He was just too drunk and probably needed to take it easy. However, this was apparently not what Hirata wanted to hear. After pulling out a knife on the emergency workers, he allegedly threatened them, then hopped behind the wheel of their ambulance and drove off. The 46-year-old didn't make it very far, though. According to police, they found him and the ambulance in the parking lot of a drugstore about 100 yards down the road and immediately arrested him. When questioned, Hirata reportedly explained his actions this way, telling police, quote, "I thought I would go to the hospital myself." Okay. Technically, this last story isn't so much a crime as it is a traffic violation, but we still decided to include it to round out today's show because we thought you'd all get a kick out of it. The whole thing began recently when a Taiwanese man, identified only by the last name of Lee, received a ticket in the mail. The ticket was for failing to yield at a crosswalk while he was driving through a busy pedestrian area in Lienchiang County back near the end of December. This might not sound that interesting until you find out that the ticket was accompanied by a photo of the incident. That photo revealed something pretty ridiculous, which was brought to the public's attention last week thanks to a social media post from Lee's son. The post read in part, quote, "My dad got a 6,000 New Taiwan dollar fine for failing to yield to pedestrians. The pedestrians were me and my sister." It turned out that on the day of the incident, Lee had given his kids a ride to a local ferry terminal. After dropping them off, he circled around the block, where he sped through a crosswalk without stopping, at the exact time his own kids were trying to cross the road. The whole story quickly went viral in Taiwan, with many commenters chiming in with their own thoughts, especially concerning the photo of the traffic violation, which some jokingly referred to as a family portrait. All kidding aside, Taiwan is known as a place that is pretty dangerous for pedestrians in general, and according to authorities, 21% of pedestrian deaths are the result of drivers hitting people in situations just like this. If nothing else, hopefully Lee's new family portrait is a reminder to be a little more patient on the road. Authorities in the Indian state of Uttar Pradesh say that a 27-year-old business owner is in hot water this week after he allegedly concocted and carried out a bizarre, elaborate, and illegal plan with a group of his employees, all for the sole purpose of obtaining a gun license. According to reports, the whole thing began in the early morning hours of January 23rd, when police in the city of Ghaziabad were contacted about a violent incident in the city's Vijaynagar area. They arrived to find 2 men, 22-year-old Gulfam Khan and 21-year-old Nirdesh Pal, who said that they had just been the victims of a terrifying attack. Gulfam had suffered a gunshot wound to his leg, while Nirdesh had a similar injury to one of his hands. Gulfam and Nirdesh explained that they worked for a local snack manufacturing business. They said that they had been out like usual that morning doing early deliveries to the company's customers when suddenly they had been ambushed by 3 men on motorbikes. They claimed that the men had opened fire on them and their vehicle. Before fleeing, they had also made threats against their boss, the chip business's 27-year-old owner, Mohammed Arif. Initially, it appears that police had no reason to question this story, especially because of Gulfam and Nirdesh's injuries. However, as they began to investigate further, they realized there were quite a few things that didn't add up. For starters, despite the supposedly violent attack, nothing had actually been stolen from the men or their truck. The truck itself also really hadn't sustained any damage, even though Gulfam and Nirdesh claimed that their assailants had shot at them indiscriminately. As it turned out, even the men's wounds were suspect. Upon closer inspection, they were surface-level injuries. On top of this, gunpowder burns around the wound suggested that the shots had actually been fired at close range. When pressed on these details, Nirdesh and Gulfam apparently crumbled almost immediately. That's when they allegedly admitted that this whole thing had been staged as part of a plot by their employer, Muhammad Arif, to make it look like his life was in danger. Why? Well, Arif wanted a gun license, and he thought that proving he was being threatened was the easiest way to obtain one. Police now say that Arif is obsessed with guns and wanted the license so he could buy a bunch and show them off on social media. They also say this isn't the first time he's tried something like this. A couple months ago, he reported a similar threat to his life, saying that some people had thrown stones at his vehicle while he was inside. That case was also dismissed when it was found that the vehicle barely had any damage to it. Arif allegedly roped Nirdesh and Gulfam into his new plan by promising them the equivalent of roughly $1,700 USD each. Nirdesh's brother Dinesh Pal was also reportedly involved in the incident and acted as the gunman. All 4 men were arrested last week and are now expected to face a number of charges. An accused Russian thief was left red-faced in more than one way this week after he allegedly robbed a convenience store while drunk, and not only was he quickly caught, but footage of his bumbling exploits were posted online. According to reports, it all started on the night of January 20th when the accused thief, who has not been identified by name, set out to rob the convenience store in question in the town of Turuntayevo. Surveillance footage from inside shows him walking into the business shortly after 10 p.m. wearing a balaclava and carrying what would later be proven to be a toy gun. After pointing the fake weapon at the person behind the counter, the man can be seen fiddling with his mask, and you can sort of tell that something isn't quite right. That's because he was apparently very drunk, something which became obvious as the man began to visibly sway back and forth while demanding that the employee hand over some alcohol. Even though more alcohol was probably the last thing the man needed, he was clearly determined as he proceeded to try and climb over the counter himself after becoming impatient. Though he successfully managed to grab a bottle of vodka, pulling himself back over turned out to be much more difficult than he bargained for in his drunken state, and ended up falling further towards the ground. Things got even more cartoonish when, in the middle of this, a customer walked in. The customer can be seen looking understandably confused at the man's legs dangling in the air, investigating what was going on before presumably spotting the fake gun and running away. While the thief managed to get away with the stolen bottle of vodka, apparently his celebration was short-lived. Police were able to track him down not long after, at which point he was arrested and his gun was determined to be a toy. Representatives from New Zealand's Auckland Police released some equally strange and amusing footage on their social media account this week. Video that shows part of a recent arrest that has been referred to as a low-speed pursuit. The whole thing reportedly began sometime on the morning of January 1st when police were called about a burglary in progress at a residential property in the small rural town of Karaka. Officers were quick to respond, but by the time they got there, the male suspect had already fled. It turned out that this wasn't a problem, though, due in large part to the suspect's choice of getaway vehicle. He had taken off in the victim's riding lawnmower. Police began searching the area, and sure enough, the man was not difficult to find. That's where this piece of amazing surveillance footage comes in, which shows 3 officers chasing down the suspect while he drives down a nearby bike path. Hilariously, the suspect can be seen looking over his shoulder as the officers quickly gain on him. Moments later, he's grabbed, and the lawnmower chase comes to an end. While few other details have been released about the case, authorities say that the male suspect is 34 years old and was arrested at the scene. He has since been charged with burglary and is expected to appear in court on March 21st. Authorities in the South African province of Gauteng say that a 32-year-old man has been arrested following a nearly 2-month-long investigation this week after he allegedly carried out a bizarre plot to extort high-ranking government officials by pretending to be a hitman. The whole thing started sometime in December of 2024 when the South African Police Service began receiving worrying reports from inside the government. Several top officials in various departments stated that they had received calls from an unknown person identifying himself as a hitman. The hitman claimed that he had been hired to kill them and would follow through with his orders unless he was paid sums between 5,000 and 10,000 South African rand. For reference, that's about $270 to $540 US. Almost immediately, it seems investigators suspected that something was up here. Not just because the amounts of money being demanded were relatively small for a crime of this nature, but also because you'd think that if you were a legitimate hitman, the last thing you'd want to do is give your target a heads up that their life was in danger. It turned out this instinct was correct, as police were eventually able to identify the culprit as 32-year-old Ndamiso Bengu. According to police, Bengu is not, in fact, a professional hitman. He was pretending to be one to try and scam money out of his victims. While this apparently did work in one case, the rest of the would-be targets responded the way that you might imagine. After being threatened, they reported what was going on and hired extra security to keep them safe. Somewhat ironically, this probably cost them more than the money they were being extorted for. In any case, Bengu was tracked down and arrested on January 28th at a property in the town of Evaton, about 25 miles south of Johannesburg. At the time he was taken into custody, authorities also reportedly found burner phones and 6 SIM cards allegedly used in the illegal scheme. The 32-year-old is now facing charges of intimidation and extortion. Authorities in the Indian state of Odisha say that an elderly man may have been left permanently disfigured following a strange and senseless attack at the hands of a drunken neighbor. According to reports, the whole thing began around 9:30 p.m. on January 21st, when the 70-year-old victim, Koredu Odi, was at home with his family members in the town of Pradeep. Suddenly, there was a loud banging at the front door, so Koredu went to investigate. Upon opening up, the 70-year-old man was face-to-face with his 30-year-old neighbor, identified only by the name Chiranjeevi. Chiranjeevi was reportedly quite drunk and immediately got angry when he was asked why he was knocking at the door. So angry, in fact, that out of nowhere, he attacked. Though Koredu's family members ran to his aid as quickly as they could, it wasn't fast enough to save him from the neighbor's deranged attack. Before they knew it, Chiranjeevi had bit the 70-year-old man's nose clean off. While Koredu was immediately taken to a hospital, unfortunately doctors there were not able to reattach his severed nose. Instead, they say that they had to reconstruct a new one entirely out of skin from his forehead. Currently, it's unclear exactly how successful the procedure was, with the head surgeon telling the media, quote, "I have not used any implant for the surgery. After 21 days, the patient will come for a review." What's also a mystery is what, if any, penalties the suspect is facing over the unhinged attack. Unfortunately, local news sources do not mention what happened to the 30-year-old, only that he was arrested after the shocking crime. Representatives from England's Greater Manchester Police say that a fugitive partially has herself to thank for her successful arrest last week, days after she attempted to taunt authorities by commenting on her own wanted poster. According to reports, the whole thing started a little over a week ago when Greater Manchester Police put out an appeal on their Facebook account for the 22-year-old woman in question. While her identity has since been redacted and is not available at this time, it said that she was wanted for failing to appear in court for 3 counts of assault on an emergency worker, drug offenses, and theft. Police were understandably hoping that members of the public would chime in with helpful tips and information, but what they never expected was a lead directly from the suspect herself. However, that's exactly what they got when the woman responded to the post with her personal account, replying, quote, "Hey guys." While the response was obviously intended as a taunting joke, unfortunately for the 22-year-old, it was police who got the last laugh. Using her reply and the many others it prompted in the comments below, they were ultimately able to track her down at a home in Manchester's Fallowfield area. As if that wasn't enough, a short clip of body cam footage that was also released this week shows part of the ridiculous arrest. In it, the woman can be seen hiding beneath a pile of toys inside the residence and pretending she isn't there, even after officers have clearly found her. In addition to the offenses the woman was already facing, police say that she has also been arrested on another charge of assaulting an officer. Authorities in the Malaysian city of Johor Bahru say that a local man is facing prison time as well as a hefty fine following a recent wild incident in which he allegedly torched his wife's car during the middle of a dispute, a crime which was partially captured in a now viral video. The whole thing started shortly before 10:30 p.m. on February 2nd when the victim, 21-year-old Si Li Jing, was driving her Toyota sedan down a major multi-lane roadway with some friends. The group were passing by a local hospital when they were cut off by Si's husband, 26-year-old auto parts worker Chai Ka-feng. According to local media, the husband and wife were in the middle of some kind of marital dispute at the time. The nature of that dispute has not been reported, though what we do know is what happened next. In video footage shot by another motorist, Chai can be seen blocking his wife's car with his work truck, causing her to stop in the middle of traffic. He then gets out, pours gasoline on the hood of her Toyota, and sets it on fire before driving off. Si and her 3 passengers can be seen running from the flaming vehicle moments later as cars continue to whiz by on either side of them. Miraculously, no one was seriously hurt. Despite fleeing the area, Chai was tracked down and arrested by police 3 days later in a town about a 2-hour drive away. He is now charged with committing mischief by fire, an offense that could see him serving some serious prison time. According to Malaysian news sources, if convicted, Chai is looking at up to 14 years in prison, as well as a hefty fine. Authorities in Thailand's Chonburi province say that they were able to avert a potential tragedy this week after a man was found passed out drunk next to his amusingly decorated motorized scooter. The whole thing happened sometime this week when concerned members of the public began contacting police in Sattahip district. The callers reported seeing a man who looked like he might be a danger to himself and others. The man had parked his scooter on the wrong side of the road and appeared to be passed out next to it on the sidewalk. When officers arrived at the scene, they found the man in question, who was still out like a light on the pavement. Next to him was his Honda Scoopy, which they noticed had been adorned with a large Hello Kitty plush toy on the front. Upon being shaken awake, the man, who was clearly intoxicated, apparently began to panic. According to police, he shoved 2 inhalers in his nostrils and began puffing in a bizarre bid to sober up. Despite the man's repeated claims that he was fine to drive, given what they had just witnessed, officers did not believe him. All the same, though, they decided to cut him a bit of slack since, although he was driving drunk, he had clearly pulled off the road intending to sleep it off. Instead of arresting him, one of them took him as a passenger on their own bike and drove him home, while another officer followed behind on the Hello Kitty bike. According to police, the man only lived a little over a mile away from where he had passed out. Authorities in the South Korean city of Busan say that a bumbling robber got more than he bargained for last week when he attempted to hold up a bank using a disguised children's toy as his weapon, but his bluff was quickly called by his would-be victims. According to reports, the whole thing began just before 11 a.m. on February 10th, when the suspect, identified only as a man in his 30s, went to the bank in question in Busan's Kijiang district. After heading up to the second floor of the building where the business was located, the man began blocking the entrance, yelling for customers and employees to, quote, kneel down. Upon seeing that the man was wearing a mask and knit hat over his head and carrying what appeared to be a gun in a black plastic trash bag, many of the terrified victims hurried to obey the order. Initially, the suspect tried to get into the branch manager's office. However, he was quickly able to shut the door and hold it while he and a customer were inside. At the same time, he called police and triggered a security alert. Realizing he wasn't going to be getting inside, the male suspect turned his attention to the bank's tellers. He instructed them to put 50,000 Korean won banknotes into a bag, each of which are worth about $35 US. Unfortunately for the suspect, it was at this point that his whole plan unraveled. While he was distracted, a man in his 50s tackled him to the ground. This provided an opening for a security guard and 3 other bank employees to jump in, all of whom helped restrain him. If there were any remaining fears about the danger the suspect posed, these evaporated when the man was disarmed and the victims got a look at the gun he was carrying. It turned out to be a children's water gun, one that was shaped like a dinosaur. According to reports, it took just 2 minutes for the whole thing to play out, and the suspect was taken into custody by police immediately after. While his name has not been released, at the time of this recording, the Good Samaritan who first took him down has been identified as former Special Forces member Park Chung-yu. Police say that they plan to present Park a certificate of appreciation for his brave and decisive actions during the incident. After all, at the time he tackled the suspect, he had no way of knowing that the only thing he was risking was getting squirted in the face. Authorities in Taiwan say that a man was officially indicted last week, almost exactly a year after he concocted a harebrained fake robbery scheme in order to get a free ride across town. According to reports, the whole thing began at around 11 p.m. on February 26, 2024, when a man called police in Kaohsiung City telling them that he needed to report a crime. The man, identified by the last name Lai, claimed that he'd just been robbed by 2 people on a white motorcycle who had taken off with his wallet. After responding to the call, officers picked Lai up and drove him to their station in Xiaogang district to file a report. However, as they began to look more into the situation, they realized that they'd been duped. You see, in addition to being his name, it turned out that Lai also happened to be an accurate way to sum up the story the man had told. Upon reviewing surveillance footage from the area he claimed to be in when he was robbed, police found no evidence of any crime. That's when Lai admitted he made the whole thing up. After being handed over to prosecutors, the man attempted to get creative, saying that he suffered from a nervous system disorder that made him think he'd been robbed. But authorities say eventually he revealed the much more simple and much more stupid truth. He had reported the fake robbery because he wanted a ride across town, but he didn't have money for a taxi. Last week, Lai was officially indicted for making a false accusation and is now awaiting further proceedings. Unfortunately, local media sources do not specify what penalties prosecutors are seeking against the floundering freeloader. Representatives from Colombia's national police released some quite literally hair-raising footage last week after a would-be smuggler was caught trying to board a plane with a large amount of drugs stashed in an amusing way. According to reports, it all went down on February 20th when the 40-year-old unidentified suspect tried to board a plane at the Rafael Núñez International Airport in the city of Cartagena. The man was planning to head to Amsterdam, however, unfortunately for him, he wouldn't be making his flight. In video released by the National Police, you can see why. As officers removed a toupee from the top of his head, they discovered a large amount of cocaine hidden inside. According to authorities, 19 capsules full of the drug were recovered from under the hairpiece, weighing a total of nearly half a pound. Had the drugs made their way to Europe, it's estimated they would have been worth the equivalent of more than $10,000 US. While it appears the toupee was actually quite well made, and as you can see, officers had to cut it from his head to remove it, fooling the human eye wasn't enough. As soon as the 40-year-old suspect walked through the airport scanners, security officials could tell something was up, and the man's drug-in-a-rug scheme came crashing down. Police say the man was immediately arrested after the discovery, and he already had 2 prior convictions for drug trafficking. Representatives from Japan's Hokkaido Prefectural Police released an announcement in connection with an equally bizarre and revolting case this week, revealing that they had arrested a 58-year-old unemployed man who was accused of putting urine into the soap dispensers of a business last year. The whole thing started sometime in the fall of 2024 when employees at a drugstore in the town of Nakashibetsu began to notice a strange trend. On multiple occasions, the soap in the dispenser of their bathroom became discolored for no apparent reason. Staff members kept an eye on this and kept changing the soap out until the evening of November 18th. That's when one eagle-eyed employee noticed that the soap had changed color yet again, right after a particular customer left the restroom. When questioned, the customer, identified as 58-year-old Kazuyoshi Tateoka, apparently revealed the awful reason why. He had been mixing piss into the soap. Following an investigation, police say that they arrested Tateoka this week, on March 3rd. He apparently was not shy about what he'd done either, telling officers, quote, "I did it to cause trouble for people." While the full reasoning for the 58-year-old's disgusting behavior will likely never be known, it seems that he probably did this several times. He is currently being held on suspicion of fraudulent obstruction of business. Authorities in the Indian city of Indore say that a jewelry store employee was nearly killed during his shift last week. However, the culprit wasn't who you'd normally expect. Instead of being the target of criminals during some kind of armed robbery, the victim was shot by one of his own coworkers following a bizarre incident over a photo. According to reports, it all started sometime on the evening of March 1st, when the victim in question, 49-year-old jewelry store sales worker Sanjay Jagtap, was finishing up his shift for the day. As he headed outside, he noticed that the business's security guard, 56-year-old Pramod Pandey, had fallen asleep in his chair while he was supposed to be on duty. Evidently amused by the situation, Sanjay took a picture of the sleeping guard and sent the photo to a WhatsApp group chat filled with other employees. They also found the picture funny, but apparently Pandey did not. After showing up to work the following day, Pandey got in a heated argument with Sanjay over the photo. And let's just say, this time he was wide awake. He was so enraged, in fact, that he allegedly pulled out his gun and shot his colleague with his work-issued weapon. Fortunately, Sanjay survived the shooting, though obviously things didn't turn out as well for Pandey. According to local media sources, the 56-year-old was arrested shortly after the incident and is now facing charges of attempted murder. An accused Australian thief was apparently foiled by his own sweet tooth this week when he broke into a business with the intention of looting it, only to get distracted by its signature desserts. The whole thing began around noon on March 8th, when brothers Alec and Paul Carney were alerted to a concerning situation at one of their stores. The brothers, who are also business partners and operators of a chain of Italian restaurants, were notified by their security system that someone was breaking into their location in the Gold Coast suburb of Nobby Beach. Because it was the middle of the day, the restaurant normally would have been packed with employees and hungry customers. However, because of Cyclone Alfred, like many business owners, the brothers had chosen to temporarily shut down. It seemed that the thief had chosen to take advantage of this fact to commit a brazen broad daylight looting. Understandably horrified by what was going on, Alec and Paul called police. They also began racing down to the scene themselves in their 1-ton food truck. However, as the brothers continued to watch the video feed from their security cameras, something strange began to happen. While the thief did start out by poking around the restaurant's cash register, he quickly got distracted by something else: the business's gelato. The thief began helping himself to scoop after scoop of the frozen Italian treat, seemingly unable to control his appetite. He got so into this, in fact, that he seemingly forgot that he put his phone down during the middle of the feeding frenzy. And while he remembered to steal a couple bottles of liquor on his way out, he ended up leaving the device behind. By the time the sweet-toothed crook realized his mistake, it was too late. After coming back to the business a second time, he was caught by Paul and Alec, who began a low-speed chase in their truck. The pursuit ended with the man unwittingly running right into police as they arrived at the scene as well. He was arrested and has now been charged with entering premises and committing an indictable offense and unlawful possession of suspected stolen property. So far, his name has not been released, and he's been identified only as a 40-year-old man. Speaking about the burglary in an interview with local media, Alex stated in part, quote, "We were a bit worried at the start, and then we realized they walked past all the expensive liquor and wine and went straight for the gelato cabinet. He had a bit of everything, but he definitely had a good dig at the pistachio. There was a little bit of humor in the whole thing, because it was like a mouse trap with the cheese. He walked past the gelati cabinet, and it was like, ooh, gelati." Despite how everything played out, the brothers also say they're not holding a grudge. In the same interview, Paul said that the thief would not be banned from the business, telling him, quote, "Come down to Gelato Gemelli in Nobby's, and we'll be more than happy to give you a free sample, even if he wants to come back for a free scoop." A massive Chinese restaurant chain is apologizing to customers and offering substantial refunds and compensation this week after they were recently the victims of a stomach-churning food tampering crime that went viral across the country's social media. The whole thing began sometime in the early morning hours of February 24th, when two 17-year-old boys, identified only by the names Tang and Wu, went to a Haidilao hot pot location in the city of Shanghai. For those unfamiliar, hot pot is a staple of many East Asian cuisines and consists of one or more communally shared broths at a table. Diners use the flavored broths to cook and eat various ingredients, such as thinly sliced meats, vegetables, rice cakes, noodles, basically whatever you can think of. Anyway, while Tang and Wu were in one of the restaurant chain's private rooms, staff apparently weren't watching as closely as they should have been, because after getting extremely drunk, the teens started peeing in their broth, filming the whole thing, and posting it on social media. As you might imagine, people were extremely grossed out by this, especially when it came to light that Haidilao had no idea what had happened. It wasn't until 4 days later that they became aware of the situation after the disgusting video went viral, and it took them another week to actually figure out which location it had happened at. While broths, utensils, and other equipment are only used by groups of diners at their own table during a given meal, the company couldn't be sure that they had thoroughly disinfected the exact cookware Tang and Wu had peed in. So to try and make it up to horrified customers, Haidilao say that they are now offering full refunds and cash back to more than 4,000 people. The business revealed this week that anyone who ate at this specific location in Shanghai's Huangpu district between February 24th and March 8th is entitled to a refund plus compensation equaling 10 times the amount of whatever their bill was. They also say that they have implemented new safety measures to prevent a situation like this from happening again in the future. That's no small task either. You see, Haidilao operates more than 1,400 restaurants in 15 countries. I have to say, I personally find this to be a relief, as I ate at Haidilao here in Toronto like a month ago. I'm happy to report that I did not notice any notes of piss in my broth, though all the same, it's nice to know steps are being taken to protect diners. All jokes aside, Haidilao is actually a super awesome place, and you should definitely try it if you get the chance. If you do, be sure to try the tableside hand-pulled noodles. It's quite an experience. Anyway, as for Tang and Wu, they were arrested by local police shortly after all of this happened. It's unclear exactly what charges they will be facing, but authorities say that in addition to being held in preventative detention, the teens are also now facing a lawsuit from the hot pot giant. The grand plans of a would-be Thai thief blew up in hilarious and ironic fashion recently after he tried to rob a mall jewelry store dressed in a ridiculous horror movie costume, only to find that he himself was trapped in a different kind of horror movie plot. The whole thing played out sometime last week when the man in question, a 21-year-old identified only by the name Etsara, carried out what he thought would be a big-time heist. After casing the Chiang Mai shopping mall, which was conveniently located near his house, he decided to use what he'd learned to try and burglarize a gold shop there. On the day in question, Etsara traveled to the mall, arriving there around 5 p.m. He then hid in a bathroom until the building closed for the night. Oh yeah, he also dressed head to toe in a Scream Halloween costume to conceal his identity. Once he was satisfied that everyone had gone home for the night, Etsara emerged from the bathroom wearing his ridiculous disguise. Armed with a crowbar, he then headed to the gold shop and forced his way in, ready for his big score. Unfortunately for the 21-year-old, the people that owned the business weren't born yesterday. They didn't just leave their valuables out on the display shelves overnight. They had all been packed away into the store's safe, a safe that was more than sturdy enough to resist Etsara's crowbar. After failing to pry open the safe, Etsara gave up, left the store, and began trying to find an exit from the mall. However, this is when he realized he was truly screwed. You see, the mall's exits were all well secured, and there was no way out. After wandering the halls for several hours, the 21-year-old apparently returned to the gold shop, seemingly resigned to his fate. He waited there, hiding behind the counter until morning, when staff arrived, promptly realized what was going on, and trapped him in there all over again. Etsara was arrested a short time later. While the whole thing is pretty stupid, according to reports, Etsara was quite apologetic and admitted to what he had done right away. And unlike in many of these kinds of stories that we cover, at the very least, it seems that if he had been successful in his robbery, he was planning to put the proceeds to good use. The 21-year-old told police, quote, "I needed money to study for a bachelor's degree at a state university in Chiang Mai. I apologize to my parents for my rash act." At the time of this recording, it's unclear if he is yet facing formal charges. An idiotic would-be thief got a searing dose of instant karma last week after he brazenly attempted to steal a locked bike in broad daylight with nothing more than a cigarette lighter and ended up burning himself instead. The whole thing unfolded on the afternoon of March 21st in the East London town of Stratford. As a man was walking down busy Station Street, he couldn't help but notice a ridiculous sight. It was a man in a large black coat who was clearly trying to steal a locked bicycle. In apparent disbelief over what he was seeing, the man pulled out his phone and began filming. In the 48-second clip, you can see the male suspect fiddling around with the lock on the bike, trying to twist and break its chain by using another bike seat as leverage. The man filming attempts to confront him, however, he keeps insisting the bicycle belongs to him. Out of an apparently growing sense of desperation at the lock's failure to break, the would-be thief eventually tried a new and much more stupid approach. After pulling out a lighter, he attempted to burn the fabric casing around the lock chain. This lasted for about 5 seconds before the man burned himself and promptly freaked out. It's not exactly clear what happened after this, though it seems things weren't getting any better for the bumbling suspect. The last thing that can be heard before the footage cuts out is an angry person, presumably the bike's actual owner, yelling, "What the fuck you doing, man?" According to reports, the Metropolitan Police were approached for comment after the footage gained traction on social media. However, so far it's unclear if the suspect has been identified or is even under investigation. Well, folks, another Easter is right around the corner, and as we all know, that can only mean one thing. Hide your Cadbury cream eggs, because people are apparently out here trying to steal them. Don't believe me? Just ask representatives from England's Cambridgeshire Police, who put out an equally strange and amusing bit of body cam footage this week showing the arrest of a man absolutely loaded down with the iconic chocolate eggs. The whole thing started shortly after 11:30 a.m. on March 22nd, when the suspect, later identified as 26-year-old Dean DeGroot, walked into a Tesco Express convenience store in the city of Peterborough. From the sounds of it, DeGroot didn't even try to pretend he was a customer. Instead, he just began grabbing box after box of Cadbury cream eggs from the store's shelves and shoving them into a duffel bag. After allegedly stealing more than 220 pounds, or about $280 worth of the eggs, he then took off without paying. A member of staff attempted to chase DeGroot, but ended up getting lucky when they were able to flag down a passing police car. The officers followed the 26-year-old, who they were able to catch a short distance away. Though he had apparently abandoned his duffel bag by this time, he wasn't exactly inconspicuous. You see, he still had a ton of the stolen cream eggs stuffed into his jacket, leading to this bizarre exchange.
It's all gonna fall out. Is it? Nice. Cool, we didn't loaded this up.
DeGroot quickly admitted to what he had done after his arrest, and this week was sentenced to 12 weeks in prison. Though that sentence was suspended for a year, the 26-year-old was also banned by the judge in the case from entering the entire county of Cambridgeshire for the next 3 months. Not sure how they're planning to enforce that, but all the same, it seems the county's cream eggs are a little bit safer, at least for now. Representatives from England's West Midlands Police say that a spoiled husband and wife have officially been convicted of attempted murder following a completely unhinged attack against the man's stepmother early last year that was intended to end with her death. The whole thing unfolded sometime on January 29, 2024, at the female victim's home in the Kings Norton area of Birmingham. According to reports, the woman had grown increasingly frustrated with her stepson, 21-year-old Wasif Hussain, and his 19-year-old wife, Nabila Tabassum. Despite being married, the two were still living at home, something which on its own wasn't a huge deal. What annoyed the stepmother, though, was that Wasif and Nabila treated the place like a hotel and refused to contribute in any way to cleaning or other household chores. When confronted about this, the couple had not changed their behavior. So finally, on that particular day, the stepmother had asked them to leave and find another place to live. For most people, this would be a wake-up call, maybe a hard lesson about the importance of pulling your weight and being a responsible adult. Wasif and Nabila, however, saw it differently. They completely snapped and decided to respond in the most messed up way imaginable. After putting on rubber giraffe masks, the pair went after the stepmother in what police later referred to as a, quote, calculated and frenzied attack. While Nabila restrained the female victim, Wasif hit her repeatedly in the head with a hammer, strangled and punched her, and stabbed her with a kitchen knife. The woman only survived the ordeal because during the attempted killing, she managed to escape and run upstairs, locking herself in a room. She then called police, who rushed to the scene. It wasn't that hard to figure out what had happened. In addition to having the victim as a witness, the whole thing had reportedly been captured by home surveillance cameras. Though Wasif and Nabila fled before police could get there, they were arrested early the next day about 100 miles away in the city of Bolton. The pair continued to deny any wrongdoing after being charged, though, as I said, there wasn't much mystery to any of this. Following a trial, they were both convicted of attempted murder on March 27th. In a statement this week, a detective who worked on the investigation stated in part, quote, "This was a calculated and frenzied attack on a defenseless woman using weapons including a knife and hammer. She was very lucky to have managed to get away, lock herself in a room, and ring us. The evidence we provided at court helped to convict these two of attempted murder. They are set to spend many years behind bars when they next appear in court for sentence. Wasif and Nabila are set to be sentenced at the end of next month." Authorities in the Indian Capital Territory of Delhi released a bizarre update to the public this week, announcing that they had arrested a notorious small-time criminal with quite the nauseating MO. According to reports, for some time, the 27-year-old suspect, whose name is Deepak, has been terrorizing the streets of Delhi. Police say he has been involved in everything from pickpocketing to armed muggings and robberies. However, that's not what he's best known for. You see, while authorities have apparently been aware of Deepak's crimes for quite a while, they hadn't actually been able to get him to face justice for an incredibly strange reason. That reason is that every time police had previously caught him, he deliberately soiled himself to avoid arrest. Seriously, I'm not joking. The man's MO is to shit his pants whenever he's caught, creating an unbearable stench and dissuading officers from taking him into custody. Police even nicknamed him Potty Badmash. Just in case you're wondering, Badmash is reportedly a term in India that means ruffian or miscreant. I personally think they missed out by not calling him the Poopy Pickpocket, but hey, that's just me. Anyway, Deepak's stealing and shitting spree apparently worked numerous times, but on March 24th, Delhi police finally turned the tables. After spotting Deepak up to his usual tricks, they came prepared with masks, gloves, and other personal protective equipment, and successfully took him into custody. At the time of Deepak's arrest, police found a knife on him, which he apparently tried to claim was simply his lucky charm. However, once he was down at the station, he reportedly confessed to a number of robbery and theft-related crimes. Police say more than half a dozen cases are now pending against him in areas all across the capital. Before we wrap up, we'd like to take a second to give a huge shout-out to everyone who has made it this far into the video. Seriously, thank you so much for watching. If you found today's upload interesting and informative, we'd be honored if you'd consider liking and subscribing, as well as hitting the notification bell and selecting all notifications to stay up to date with our latest releases. If you're looking for additional ways to help support the channel, we'd love to have you join us over on Patreon. Patrons get ad-free and early access to all of our content, as well as 4 additional stories per week for each of our Crimes of the Week and Crimes of the Week International videos. You can learn more at patreon.com/crimezone, where you'll also find some of the fine folks whose names are currently on screen. All that being said, we understand that not everyone has the means to support financially, and that's totally okay. We appreciate every like, sub, share, and comment that you send our way. Once again, thanks so much everyone, and take care.